and welcome everyone to another recording of the Content Marketing Studio. Another show, another season to help you create better content faster. Today, I'm going to put the spotlight on the very special guest to help us rethink website accessibility and help us create content for a more diverse audience. I am your host, Pascal Fintoni, and I'm joined today by Ahmed Khalifa. Ahmed, welcome to the Content Marketing Studio.
Well, I'm so excited to be here, Pascal. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being with me. It's a lovely way to end a long day to be in your company. Can I begin by asking two important questions at this moment in time? Where are you and how are you doing?
I am based in the UK, and obviously we are working from home, and I'm okay with that. I'm fine with working from home, and I'm comfortable despite the cool weather outside. But I'm very well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for asking.
Not at all, not at all. I think it's important. So Ahmed is the founder and director of Khalifa Media Limited, the go-to consultant for all of us who have a web presence. But you are also the founder and director of Hear Me Out CC. You are here to help raise awareness of deaf awareness and by public speaking, running workshop, but also you're here to bridge the gap between the worlds of the hearing and the worlds of the deaf. And I just think it's a wonderful way for you to help me start this new series, new subset of the Content Marketing Studio in and around this idea of helping me rethink what I think and understand of website accessibility by talking to you about your own efforts. So to begin with, can I ask about Hear Me Out CC? What is it and how did you come up with the idea?
Well, the long story short of why I started it is because I am deaf clinically, medically, and that is something that I have had my entire life. And I've always been quite just private about it. But over the past few years, just gradually over time, I decided to be more vocal about it and to share stories. And it's a way for me to have like an outlet. And really started from just one YouTube video. And I called it my let go video because I let go of that assumption that it's a bad thing to have. So I just started to be more open about it. And it kind of snowballed into just a lot of content over time where I have found myself teaching and sharing stories and sharing my knowledge about deafness. And it can be in various sectors. It could be in your personal life, it could be at work, it could be in a cinema, it could be at a restaurant, it could be anything. And the reason I decided to be more vocal about it is because one, I wanted to be free, but also I wanted to also do my bit to help other people so that they can help me and those like me as well. So it didn't make sense for me to be quiet about it and assume that people will be able to help me. I realized that I've got a responsibility for myself, but then the fact that it's benefiting other people, whether they are hearing or deaf, then it's just really, really nice. I receive so many messages, private and email and comments on YouTube. And I get so many messages saying how helpful the content I've been creating, whether it's a YouTube video, podcast, or a blog post, it has been helping them a lot because they wanted to either communicate with someone or they wanted to make it easier to go through a certain situation in life because they're deaf. It's really just from life experience, and I managed to get out there via content. That's how it started.
So can we go back one step? You mentioned that this is a newer initiative and something that you've only thought recently. Is it because, with respect, you just got on with your professional private life without thinking much about your deafness, or is it more because you didn't feel maybe that there was an audience for it?
I think there's an element of being quite embarrassed by it when I was younger. I grew up in that environment where it just felt like I can't be too vocal about it. Unfortunately, we also live in a world where it does have a bit of a stigma to it in terms of when you want to apply for a job or want to have an opportunity at a certain situation, it kind of get pushed aside. And I think due to life experiences, I decided to just keep it to myself, keep it quiet, and just chin it and bear with it and just deal with it. And after a while, that gets very, very exhausting. And over time, I realized that doing me injustice. It's not helping me at all in the long term. So it's just because of that life experience, I felt like I've been oppressed. But then the more I talk about it, just like therapy, the
Mm.
more I realize that it's helping me and it's helping other people. So I do see the content when I create it, it's like therapy for me. It's quite therapeutic because I just share my stories or my knowledge or some tips or advice. And generally, they are very well received. So that's also a very nice feeling, isn't it? In terms of massage your ego a little bit, but at the end of the day, you have to provide value from doing that. So
Mm.
thankfully, I didn't let negative setbacks in the past stop me from doing it, because I don't think I'd be where I am today, where I feel a bit more just free, a bit lighter on the shoulder. I'm able to be myself around people and just be upfront. Say, I can't deal with it. I can't hear you. I need to work out other ways to go through it. So you get older, you get wiser, and you ignore what you've dealt with in the past. And thankfully, I've got a positive outcome from it.
No, absolutely. So, can we go back to obviously a time before the pandemic where you could go out and about and you delivered workshops and, gave some presentations? What was the content of those workshops and presentations?
One type of workshop I done actually is for a company that they're like a travel company, and it's basically about how you can work with travelers and passengers who are deaf and stuff. And it's a lot of discussion about my personal experience, but then I also create scenarios of things that I haven't gone through. So, for example, I tend to go very basic about, first of all, what is deafness, because it's a big spectrum. People will assume that, how come I can hear you a little bit, but then other people say, but you're speaking fine, or how come I thought you only speak in sign language? You have to clarify all these things, get rid of the myth that people assume, and just educate that, get in the broader sense of what is deafness, and then hopefully get a better idea that there's no one way of doing it. Everyone is different. And then eventually get into the niche topic of traveling. So what are the challenges that I deal with? Because obviously there's no point me telling them about, oh, in school I had to deal with this. It's not relevant to them. So as well as discussing about the big spectrum of deafness, then I get niche and talk about in a travel world and travel industry, this is what we all have to go through, and this is how you can help. So for example, very, very common when you go on a train or on a plane, they love to use tannoys, but tannoys are useless for me. I generally can't work out what is said. So there are times where I just, hopefully there are like boards that tell you all of information, or electric signs, anything like that. But there may be people who, if they don't know where something is, or they don't hear anything, and they ask you, you just have an open mind why that person is struggling. It could be certain things that are hidden, because at the end of the day, it's a hidden disability, it's an invisible disability. So certain things like that, just like, okay, that person can't hear the tannoy, so I'm going to have to help them the other way. And it's going to be a very noisy environment. So when you are at an airport or a train station, you're surrounded by hundreds, maybe thousands of passengers. So it's very, very noisy. So it's about communicating that clearly. Sometimes it's about writing it down or writing it on your phone. Other time, just face to face, so I can lip read you, I can just see you. It's a well lit environment, a lot of things like that. And you can then see that a lot of it is about communication, because that's the big thing for us. It's just a communication barrier when you're trying to find a solution to, where is my gate for this plane, or when do I get off this train? And even little things like talking to the conductor on the train, if they know that there's an issue, like for example, it's supposed to be direct, but something happened that you have to change train, you're not always going to know that on a tannoy, and I won't be able to hear it. But if the person can use the initiative and say, by the way, I don't know if you heard, you have to change train at this station to go to this station. Little things like that. It's communication barrier is always a big thing. So these are just a few examples that
Mm.
I have done in a recent workshop.
Am I right in thinking when we spoke to each other that you've done some work in and around I could be wrong, forgive me, Ahmed, museums and kind of attractions as well?
In what sense? Say again?
So when you were doing some of that speaking and workshops, had you been approached at some stage by museums and other form of visitor attractions, or were you planning on addressing that as well?
It is part of my, I guess, goal as well,
Mm,
because there are a number of industries that can benefit from it. So I haven't done anything specific, but what I was thinking about is certain events, like at a museum, maybe there's a tour going on, then they always do. So I want to make sure that, okay, travel industry, I can adjust my content to work for them. Then there's the museum, the art, the events, adjusted for that. Then there's another adjustment for certain another situation. Yeah, my overall goal is to adapt to certain industry and environment so that it can work for everyone when you are a visitor or a customer at that particular moment.
When you talked about the spectrum, are you able to give some examples or help us understand what that spectrum is and entails?
Sure. I mean, the way I see the word deaf, because people can split it into many ways. So there's deaf, but then there's also deaf small d and deaf capital D. So the best way to describe it is if you are small d deaf, you haven't really been brought up in that culture, deaf culture. You haven't went to deaf school. You've been brought up mainstream. Most likely, but not all the time, you speak orally, not sign language, and you are more clinically and medically deaf. Whereas capital D deaf is separate. You are culturally deaf. You brought up in that environment. You brought up in that culture. Your first language, most of the time, not all the time, is sign language. Then you went to hang around with the deaf community. That is your entire identity is around that. There is a bit of controversy about is it a good thing or a bad thing? Does it separate? Does it not? But that's one way of describing it. And then there are some people, they call themselves hard of hearing. And then there are other people who call themselves deafened or deafened just later in their life. But then whatever it is, I mean, each and every single person in whatever category, and there's more, there's also deaf blind, and then there's deaf wheelchair users, or whatever. It can go on for ages. The thing is, every single person is different. And everyone assumed that I am fluent in sign language. I'm not. I'm learning sign language, but I'm not. And then everyone assumed that I am not going to be able to have a video call. But I say, no, I'm not. I adapt in my way. And I also ask the other person to do things for me. So, for example, high quality audio from your side is essential for me. And the fact that I can see you, it's well lit. And on top of that, on my side, I have sound equalization tool on my side to make sure that I focus more on the voice. Good headset on. I'm in a quiet room. All these little things combined together makes a difference. And that's the whole point about this whole spectrum is that you can't just assume. People always assume that, for example, a person who is fluent in sign language, they are also fluent in written or oral. But that's not the case because it's a completely separate language, different structure, different grammar. So when you think about a person who is mainly communicating via sign language and you're telling them, oh, don't worry about it, it's captioned or it's written down, it's a whole new language for them. They will not always be able to understand it because it's a different structure. And there's a lot of debate right now at the moment about the government briefing during the pandemic is not having any, there's no interpreters in England. Other countries, they have it. A lot of argument, people say, oh, don't worry about it, it's captioned. The problem is, though, one hand, it's auto caption, very low quality. And the second problem is the caption is in a different language. Yes, it's English, but sign language and your spoken language are completely different languages, different everything. So the way you say anything, like for example, my name is Pascal, you don't say that in an order in sign language. You say it's something along the lines of name I Pascal, something that order. So there's so many nuances in the culture of deafness, which I think is amazing because it just makes it very diverse and beautiful. But I can appreciate it's quite complicated to understand. Hence why I'm trying to be vocal about it as much as I can.
Now, thanks for that. So, can we go back to? I'm just curious because for our viewers and listeners, I've known Ahmed for quite some time, and the numbers of years escape me now. But I would argue that Ahmed, for the first year, even longer, I did not know you were deaf at all. Because essentially our social interaction, professional interaction was such that it didn't, and it was, I think, later that you told me about it, and it's back to this idea of, so what do you have in place? I think you gave us some examples for this Zoom call to go well, and then remind me again, for me and many others out there, what we could do, those sensible adjustments that could obviously make it easier to be understood and to communicate with you.
Yeah, it's my responsibility to tell you that. And this is the thing, I hide it very well. And I'm not surprised that you didn't know it, because I just pull it off in a way that I have been doing for the past few decades. I just don't tell anybody. And yes, it's not that obvious. And that's one thing. I don't sign in front of people or anything like that. And I sometimes we're hearing it, sometimes I don't. And
Okay.
I'm doing that more often now. But even then, that's not always obvious. So I'm just a good liar, I suppose, in terms of not just telling people like, oh no, I'm fine. But I just realized over time, if I'm going to be really open and honest about it, it's declining, and there will be a point where it will get worse, and I can't hide that anymore. And it will make it more difficult, especially in the communication sense, if I keep hiding it from people, especially if it's going to decline more. And that is why I thought, okay, I have to be open about it, because those reasonable adjustments will not just benefit me, but it will also benefit the other person as well. And thankfully, we have things organized ourselves, because we're both kind of, tech savvy. We've done a lot of video calls. We want to make sure our audio is high quality. But I know not everyone will be able to do that. So I ask him to make little adjustments, like you don't have to have the big headphone that I have or the gamer headphone that other people have. Even if you have those hands-free kit that you get with your mobile phone, not the best, but it's better than using the internal microphone from the laptop. The audio is just terrible like that. So that's why I'm trying to be open and vulnerable at the same time about it, because I know that it would help me in a long term, the other person, and everyone around. And I feel like that is my duty to do that.
Yeah, thanks very much. So when we talk about your content for Hear Me Out CC, I can tell that, frankly, me, you're having a blast. I can tell that you're writing or you're creating content about something that you truly believe in and you're passionate. And I'm not saying that content previously was no good, Ahmed, but there's a little extra spark in there that I think is a joy to kind of witness. So can you just take us through your, may I say, content marketing efforts, for Hear Me Out CC?
Well, even the fact that you've mentioned that, and I appreciate that. It's amazing that you can see that. I guess the advantage that I have is because it's who I am. I'm being me. I can't fake being a deaf person. Nobody can. So by being yourself, by being open and vulnerable and not pretend to be someone else, it makes the whole process, first of all, a lot smoother, but it just allows me to convey my personality very well. So I'm glad that that comes out, because that is my intention. I want to do that. I spend a heck of a lot of time on my content. I believe it's the best way to educate, but you can also entertain as well. I've got several different systems that I like to use, but the main one that I do right now is kind of similar to yourself, in that I have a video recording of myself, whether it's with someone else, but I could do it myself. So I've got a video, YouTube video, and I make sure when I talk in a way that it's also useful for a podcast. So it's also, you can use it for audio. And obviously the video will be captioned as well. But then the podcast, it's not accessible. So another thing that I do on top of it is to get it transcribed. And I have a transcription. But a lot of people, when they think of transcription, it's like, okay, get it done, and then you copy and paste it. But I'd like to go another level and make it more engaging and just easier to read, more fun to read. Because when you just copy and paste text, it's not fun to read. So I treat my transcript like I would do with an article, like a blog post. Get the headings, get the subheadings, use bullet points if you need to, and the numbered listings, use media in terms of embedding videos in between or add images in between paragraphs, make it scannable to read, add maybe quotation, images or quotation tags in the middle if there's a quote going on. I treat the transcript like I would do with an article. And it just makes it a lot more engaging, easy on the eye, because let's face it, if it's one big, massive chunk of text, I'm leaving. You look at that and you think, God, no, I'm not going to look at that. I don't want to. It's just too overwhelming to look at that. It's not easy on the eye. So that kind of my main process when I do my content. And because of that, from a video, I can kind of create 3 pieces of content from doing that. And thankfully, they're all accessible. The video is captioned, the caption can be used as a transcript, and then obviously the podcast is there. So you have options. And I always like to give people how they can access the content. In the long-term plan, my really big ambition is to have sign language translation on it as well. So a video, whether it's myself or someone, of a person translating what is written down in sign language. At the moment, British Sign Language, who knows what I will do afterward? There are hundreds of sign language, by the way, around the world. That is my really, really long-term ambition. I want to do that. But that's kind of what I do right now. And it really works for me. It really works really well for me, and people engage with it. It's working very, very well. And thankfully, I have a system that makes it as pain-free and smooth as possible.
No, thanks very much. So I'm going to go back on a couple of things you've said. Firstly, I can't help but ask, what are you using for the captioning of the videos? Are you using a software or an online service?
It depends on the length of video sometimes. So if it's like a really short video, getting it automated is fine. YouTube has the auto caption feature that if you go to the studio and you edit the subtitle or caption itself, it will take you to the editor, and you can do it there. It's ready for you. And you can use that to download the file, upload it in other videos. And if you want to upload that video onto Facebook, you can use that file. Or you can convert that file into text, and then you can use it as transcript. So I do that for the shorter videos. I also sometimes use a couple of different tools. I'm currently testing different tools. That's going to be one of my content strategies as well, just testing different tools. The most popular one that everyone would be familiar with is Rev. And Rev, you can do it by a person, a human doing it for you. But for the long piece of content, it's very, very expensive. So instead of using Rev human generated version, they have an automated version, and it's not perfect, but it will give you like a draft, then you can edit it. That's also quite decent. Right now though, I am mainly using and kind of enjoying the process of using a tool called Happy Scribe. And it's one of the newer ones. And they seem to have a lot of customers, even though they're one of the newer ones. And I just like the format, the system, the interface. It makes it quite easy to use. And it allows you to create subtitles or transcripts. When you upload your audio or you upload your video, same idea. It's automated. It's all artificial intelligence, which is why it is essential that you manually check it. Never ever depend on automated, version of the captioning tool or transcription tool to do it for you. No way. But that's currently my main tool. But there are so many tools out there for captioning and transcription that I feel like competition is heating up. So the quality, I think, will get better and better, but it will never be perfect, in my opinion. You always have to manually check it, whether it's human generated or robot generated.
Well, what is interesting for me to kind of react to, is about this captioning of videos, particularly on social media, where the number one argument was put forward was around, oh, well, it's because people don't watch videos with the sound on, or that will help you, play to the algorithm game. And I thought, well, there's also a more valid argument, which is to actually, reach a much wider audience and make your content more accessible. So, thanks for the reminder. In terms of, let's say, right, so I'm going to ask you, because this conversation is about helping us rethink. If I were to, go through my own website, for example, and be a little critical and go, have I done enough to essentially, make sure that by accident I don't actually, almost put barriers in the way for someone who's on the deaf spectrum. For example, writing, online content for somebody who's learned, to read very, very differently with, some changes. Do you want me to consider writing differently to organize the content, the paragraph differently, or do you think that so long as I write for the web and get that would work well for you?
It's one of those cliche things that people in SEO think about, because that is my
Mm.
background in SEO. Do you write for the search engine or do you write for humans? And I always say write for humans. It doesn't matter if you write for the search engine if the human don't like it when they arrive there. Everything that you said makes sense in terms of when you are writing and typing it out only. So let's just assume there's no videos or podcast. It's just like a written article. People forget that when you are creating a structured piece of article and it's easier on the eye, there are people out there who will appreciate it because, for example, they have certain disability that you don't really think about. So it could be some kind of learning processing disorder. It could be someone who's also deaf, but then they need to read it in a simple way because it's separated. Paragraph, heading, it just separated out. It could be someone with an attention deficit disorder. Again, if you make all of these aspects of what an article looks like, the heading, the paragraph, the format, bold, italic, all these things, if you do everything that's necessary to make it easy on the eye, and that's the key thing, it's easy on the eye, then it will go a long way to make it easier for people to consume it. And I'm not just talking about the average person who doesn't have any kind of disability. I'm talking about everybody will benefit from it. If it's easy on the eye and it's scannable and it's an enjoyable reading experience, why is that a bad thing? I think everyone can benefit from doing that when you are a consumer. And at the end of the day, we should be doing it for them, even if it's more work. Because yes, it will be more work doing all these little things, but it's for them, it's not for you. And if you want him to take you seriously, you want him to enjoy what you've created, well, then it's about making it as engaging and consumable and scannable and easy on the eye as much as possible. That's why I emphasize just what I said earlier about transcription. It's not just a copy and paste and then dump it and that's it.
Mm.
That's not an enjoyable experience for anyone. And if you find that it's not an enjoyable experience for yourself and you don't have any kind of disability, then for other people with disability, it's just going to be too much for them, too overwhelming. And you lost them and you lost the other group of people. So nobody's going to win if you take shortcuts from just writing articles. And I've learned that the hard way. I've learned that thinking, oh, you know what? No wonder this article is not performing well. It just doesn't really make it engaging. And at the end of the day, I think people need to realize as well that in terms of SEO, it's not just about getting people to go on your page from Google. It's also getting people to stay on your page and to engage with your content. There is a terminology in SEO where if your users are pogo sticking, so the toy, the pogo stick where you stand on it and you spring one place to another. If a person is on Google and then goes to your site, then back to Google, back to your site, and then it just pogo sticking that way, it's a negative experience for you. It's kind of a signal for Google to saying, that's not a good content. I wonder why. It might be very well written, but maybe it just you didn't answer the question, or you didn't really do a good job to make it easy to read. It could be many, many reasons. But I'm willing to bet that one of those reasons is because it's not structured well for the human eye. And that's why you should write for the humans, not for search engines.
Mhm. So we mentioned obviously captioning with video, which I'm a big fan. I think I also saw some examples where they're going to start to get translated in real time. The captioning in different language is going to be absolutely amazing. But within that, then in your research, which you may have just begun, what would be the process to then get the sign language onto the video? I mean, I saw some early attempts in the early 2000s where it was literally somebody which had been recorded behind the green screen, and then you would overlay them with the video. But that was very complicated to book it, to get it organized, and so on and so forth. 20 years later, or a bit less than that, I wonder whether you've discovered some more recent ways of getting the sign language.
There are so many out there, and I think gradually there are people creating like directories and making it easy to find places. There are registered ones and there are certified ones, and they have their own directory as well. So when you find like the National Association, they tend to have, these are the qualified registered one. The big thing people need to think about, and people forget, is that every country has their own sign language. It's amazing that maybe I took it for granted, but people always assume that there's one sign language that is suitable for everyone, but it's not the case. Every country has one. So even if you want to do that, then you have to think about, okay, what language I'm going to do it in.
Mm.
Because even for me, for example, I am based in the UK. I'm speaking with the UK in mind. However, most of my traffic is from the US. I think it's about maybe 65, 70% approximately from the US, and then maybe another 20 approximately UK. So I'm thinking, does that mean should I think about doing it in American Sign Language and not British Sign Language? But the thing is, I'm learning British Sign Language, and then it gets really complicated. So it's, for me, I would think about that first. Who are you going to talk to? And also, I would open that question to people who have never really thought about that. It's like, would you find that useful? Or do you know anyone who wish they can access this content, they find it useful? Because I guess there's no point putting all our effort in if people don't use it. So I would always kind of like grow my relationship with certain people, certain interpreters, talk to different people, get a feel of it. Is there a need for this? And I think it's not too much to ask to do that. There are a lot of people out there who can do the interpretation virtually for you as well. They would have it all set up. It's, as you said, they'll have a green screen or whatever. They have a process that people don't think about. For example, the importance of having a clean background. It's so that they can pick up your signs. There's no distraction. There's no noise. Interpreters think like that. Even the clothes they're wearing, you just make sure it's not too loud and you're not distracting them from certain thing that you're signing. They know all these things. I'm not the expert in this. But I think you should ask your audience, or ask, someone in the audience, do you know anyone who would benefit from this? Would it be useful for you? And then start that conversation with certain people. Why would you need it? What challenges are you having? Do you prefer this way? Do you prefer that way? And then you gradually, when you look for people who can do it for you, you build that relationship. Just make sure that you know what language you're going to focus on, and certified interpreters as well. You want to make sure that you get the best one possible.
Do you know, just made me realize something. So many years ago, I was invited to present at it was a charity stroke business looking after, deaf people who wanted to be entrepreneurs. And I had this incredible privilege and experience of delivering workshops with a British Sign Language interpreter next to me. And I had to do things differently. I learned, to go a bit slower, to take my time, and to change, the way in which I would organize information. But I just realized what you just said a moment ago. One could have, for example, a webinar or a Zoom call where I could be presenting, and somebody else could be, in view doing the sign language. And back to your point, could be a bit grand, but have people from different part of the world all doing different signs for the different audience on board. Because I think that's why it's exciting. Technology is making all those things could have been a bit more complex in the past, just more possible nowadays.
It is, and I think one thing that you're right about, you can make all of this virtually. And one thing that people don't realize over the past month, I think, there's been like a mini campaign in the deaf community, but also by the interpreters as well. They are nudging Zoom to allow the option of pinning more than one video screen. So what they want is, you want to get the option of pinning the speaker and pinning the interpreter so that you can see both at the same time. Because what they're saying is, can you make it more accessible for deaf people who require the speaker, because they might be presenting something, maybe there's a PowerPoint or whatever, but can you also allow them to pin more than one speakers? Because maybe there's an interpreter there. But of course, if the interpreter is not saying out, is not speaking loudly, then it won't come up unless you pin it manually. But then you can only pin one at a time. So little things like that, it's just gradually, people are noticing, oh, wait a minute, if Zoom can do this, it make it easier. And as you say, now more and more people are doing webinars and doing virtual events and virtual meetings. These things are now becoming a necessity to allow the option of pinning. It's a small thing, but now people are talking about it. And I think over the past month, I think Zoom is thinking about it, or they're going to implement it. I'm not sure where they are now, but it's what you said. It's more virtual now, so let's make it easier for everyone.
Have you come across, again, as part of your research and kind of movement, some interesting use of technology for either people who are on the spectrum or even for the content creators to make their content more accessible? I mean, I can think, for example, of you mentioned on YouTube doing the auto captioning now. They're also rolling it out to mobile phone users who can talk and then show their screen, and then there's the auto captioning. But have you come across some interesting things to make content more accessible to people who are on the deaf spectrum, but equally for the creators?
People are getting more creative, definitely, with their technology. I remembered one time I've seen a transcription app, and I remember seeing that you can translate it in many different ways, in many languages, not necessarily sign language. And I remembered when, say, for example, you want to translate from English to French or French to English, before you even start saying what you want to say and they translate it, there is already something in there saying that show this to the person that you want to speak to. And there's already like a default text saying, this person does not know this language, and you show it to them. And then it says at the bottom saying, oh, wait, this person wants to translate using an app. So do this first before you speak into it, because sometimes you stand there and you're speaking into it or you're typing, you don't know what that person wants and you're waiting and waiting. So I've noticed some apps out there, they try to break the ice by having a default text already saying this person does not speak this language. In that person's language, please wait while I write what I want to write or whatever. The ice is broken, right? I'm going to write it out and then show it to them. It's not content marketing related, but it's part of the whole communication process to make it easier. And I thought that's quite good. Quite just a small, simple thing. I think it's a really good idea. But in terms of what I've seen in terms of the content side of it, I haven't seen anything that stood out to me. What has stood out to me, though, is that, for example, YouTube auto caption has gotten better. It was launched, I think, November 2009, when Google has announced auto caption. Everyone was like, he's amazing. But you can imagine back in 2009, it's pretty poor. It's definitely better now, and I think it will get better. And I think it's quite sophisticated what they can do. Now, of course, you can make it easier and more accurate by having clear audio. That's why a microphone is useful, no background noise. Hopefully, the accent is easy to understand. But I don't think it will ever be 100% perfect. Because it's a robot. It's a robot. No, robot can't judge your emotions. Robots can't work out what you're saying. And a classic example when it didn't work out so well is I remembered I was watching a video on YouTube, and it's about grinding and brewing coffee. Because I've got an espresso machine, I grind it, I do the whole barista thing, and I wanted some tips. So there was a video I watched, and unfortunately, it didn't have proper caption. It's using auto caption. I thought, let's see where it goes. When the person was speaking, it came up okay. It was all right. And then when he put the grinder on, the beans were grinding. Obviously, there's a sound effect. So to most people, the sound effect will be, you can write it at the bottom, maybe a whirring noise or beans grinding. But the auto caption, it says applause. And I'm thinking applause. And then I realized, oh, wait a minute, because the bean grinding machine, it doesn't sound like an applause, but the auto caption thought it sounded like an applause. The caption came at the bottom, says applause. And I'm like, oh, this is why you should always manually edit the auto caption. So as much as we talked about, okay, have I seen anything that stood out, like really, really amazing invention that, stands out above the rest? I haven't seen anything yet. It's getting better. But I feel like people should focus more on themselves rather than relying on technology. Audio quality, background noise, good internet connection. You need to do that. So we can't depend on technology to do all the work. We have to put in the work as well.
Oh, that's great. Listen, if people had genuine interest in understanding, and becoming more aware of deafness and deaf spectrum, are there some official, forgive me, site or official kind of groups that we can turn to read more about it or listen more about it?
It's hard to find that one specific site. There are a bunch of companies out there, like a interpreting agency. They have some content here and there, and then there are like national bodies and charities. They have content here and there.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen a lot of them, and I'm not sure about the quality of them sometimes. Sometimes they're outdated, or maybe they're not engaging enough, or they lack a bit of extra in terms of video or make it up to date. So I haven't seen anything like that.
Okay.
But there are, what I would say is to go on YouTube and look at an individual person's experience. So there are a few YouTubers out there that they actually focus specifically around the topic of deafness. There's one person who speaks orally but also sign sometimes. There's another one only sign language. So what I would say that as much as it's good to get information from these companies, sometimes knowing what a person goes through, how they deal with certain things day to day life, YouTube is a good place for that. So follow some like really good YouTubers, and they'll be quite good for you to learn more about it from a real person's perspective.
Excellent. Well, listen, it's been really helpful to have you, join the call to help us, reflect and rethink what we understand and how we feel about website accessibility. But I can't let you go just yet. I've got, before we say goodbye, I've got a bit of a fun quiz for you to take part
Oh,
in.
yes.
I hope you don't mind.
I'm up for it. I'm up for it.
Again, before we say goodbye, a quick question for you. If you could have a Zoom call with a celebrity, which could be from the business world or the world of entertainment, who would you invite on that Zoom call?
Oh, God. Business and celebrity. I think, okay, I'm going to say because I am a sports fan and a football fan, and I support Newcastle United.
Right.
So I would, because it would have been nice if it happened many years ago, but because he passed away, I wish it could have been Sir Bobby Robson.
Yeah.
But he's, a bit of a legend in the game, passed away. So in terms of right now, Alan Shearer, let's just say with that would be quite an interesting discussion to have, I think.
I would imagine so, yes. So listen, you are able to enjoy a private concert, online concert for you and your family, probably through Facebook Live. If you could invite a band or an artist to play for you and your family, who would that be?
So see, because of that, it has to be appropriate for the entire family. So can't really invite Eminem, it's not going to work like that. So my wife and I, we are big fans of Stereophonics.
Right.
We have been to a few gigs, and I play some of the songs on my guitar behind me, and that's kind of an easy one for me. So Stereophonics, it's enjoyable. Everyone can, dance to it or enjoy it. Yeah, it's an easy one for me.
Perfect. So since you're going to have an online concert, you can also order a meal for you and your family. So what food would you order for you to eat whilst enjoying the concert?
See, I love seafood, but again, I have to think about the guest. They not always going to like seafood. I can't order calamari and squid, and they're not going to like it. So I would say I'm a foodie boy. I like my food, different
Mm,
cuisines. So I would say lot of plates of Middle Eastern food. Little place of this, little place of
yeah.
this that you can see. It's like a tapas style, but more like a meze, like the Greek way.
Mm,
But there's also a Middle Eastern way. There's a Lebanese way. Um, you always have a lot of little plates, and you
yeah.
can share and things. That would be nice for me. A bit of everything.
Oh, that's splendid. Listen, um, you've been invited to have your own radio show, would you believe? That podcast of yours is doing so well.
Oh
So
wow!
if you could have your own radio show, what would you talk about and who would be your co-host?
What would I talk about? I think it would be wrong of me to not talk about something that I know about, which is deafness. And I think that would be quite an important topic. Obviously, the irony is it's audio based, so I'm going to have to make sure it's accessible, all these things. And I would also, the co host, it would be someone I would say not deaf. I'm not sure who it'd be. It'd be someone hearing because you want to have that opposing
Mm,
argument, have a debate. Maybe that person can say things that maybe it's awkward for some people to say. So I would have a co-host that does not know anything about it, but is able to join in that conversation debate so that to educate the world. I don't know who that would be. I mean, it's available for you if you want it. So
Oh,
it's
well,
there.
thank you very much. And then just to close, obviously, what we are going through will be behind us at some stage, hopefully not too long. So you can take your family on a trip. Where are you going to go?
Family on a trip. Okay. I've got a big, big family. It's going to be hard to congregate in one place. Okay. That's a tricky one. I guess it would be somewhere on a private island, very cliche. I was going to say a private island. It's very cliche, but I think it's just because sometimes you want time for yourself, not somewhere that is overly touristy or too busy. Somewhere that you can be by yourself, enjoy the food, enjoy the weather. So I would say a Caribbean island.
Mm,
I haven't been there, so somewhere new for me.
mm.
But it's just the idea of a bit of privacy, not congested with a lot of people, good food, good weather. Yeah, that sounds good to me. I wouldn't mind doing that.
Ah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for taking part in this fun quiz. Listen, if people have more questions for you in and around, obviously, the work you do with Hear Me Out CC, and of course, who you are as a business consultant, what is the best way to get hold of you?
The easiest thing to do is obviously the website is hearmeoutcc.com, but my social media handles is consistent across Twitter is my main one, Facebook and Instagram, and also YouTube, which is I am Ahmed Khalifa, and that is open. DM is open, and you can ask me questions there. I'm available if you want to chat.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much again for joining the Content Marketing Studio today, Ahmed. To all of you viewers and listeners, thank you for your support. Do leave comments and feedback and also suggestions about guests and topics for the future. Until next time, go out there and make sure you look after your audience better and faster. Bye for now.